Welcome to the Cannabis 101 podcast, your guide through the legalization and consumption of cannabis in Canada and beyond. Here's your host, Dean Millard.
Hello there, and welcome to episode 40 of the Cannabis 101 podcast. My name is Dean Millard, and remember, it's not just about getting high, it's about getting healthy. I hope a lot of you and all of you are healthy and safe and getting through this as best as you possibly can. It is a really bizarre situation. We're going to talk a lot about how the cannabis industry has been affected so far and what might happen with COVID-19. John Carl, the executive director of the Alberta Cannabis Council, will drop by the program, and he will be able to tell us a little bit more about what's going on with some of that stimulus money that's going into every industry, it seems, but the cannabis industry, and also what is happening and might happen with store closures. Some have closed, some are staying open. So we'll get the latest from John on that situation. David Wiley from the OZ will join us for This Week in Cannabis News, as he does each and every week. And a lot of focus will be on what is happening with COVID-19. But there's some other things to talk about, some good and some bad. Drinks, good. Aurora stock, not very good at all. And we've given Chris Ianson, our educator on what's that strain, we've given him the week off. He's been really busy at Nova Jasper Ave, and we just weren't going to be able to sneak it in. Plus, we're practicing social distancing. Chris will hopefully join us next week, probably in a Skype version, if we can make that work. So that's kind of what we have going on the show this week. A little bit of a condensed version. By the way, we were telling you about the Cannabis and Hemp Expo that was slated to take place April 25th and 26th at the Expo Center in Edmonton. That has now been postponed. It will be rescheduled at a later date. You can find out more information at cannabishempexpo.com. When they do reschedule, we will hopefully be there with a booth. We had a booth for the first one, so hopefully the dates work out for us whenever they are announced for the rescheduled version, and hopefully we'll be there. But again, you can get information at cannabishempexpo.com, and as long as we're going to be there, we will have some tickets to give away. All right, before we get into the meat of the show, I got to find out, what's your groove?
Put that in your pipe and smoke it.
Can you dig it?
Kinda grabs you by the boo-boo, don't it?
Pipe in a grape, bong in a blend.
All right, so when I say groove, I want to know what you're going with while listening to this show. Maybe it's a joint, a bong, an edible, some oil. Who knows? Maybe you got a nice CBD strain to help you relax and get through what is going on. But whatever it is, let me know, what is your groove? So I'm going with a something economical. It's the batch quince. So I did a bit of a stock up run the other day. Money is a little bit tight for a lot of people, so I was trying to be economical, and 5 joints for about $27 is a pretty good deal. So I'm going with the batch, the quince. And now that I have my groove on, we can get on with the rest of the show. So let me know what you're grooving with. If you are, hit me up on Twitter at Duck Millard. And this is something I really want to tell you about. Regular listeners of this show know all about what's going on with Lobo Genetics. You can get a DNA kit and you can get 50% off when you use the promo code Cannabis101. That's all one word, Cannabis101. 50% off a DNA kit when you use that promo code at lobogene.com. Now, you can find out how you metabolize with cannabis, how THC affects you, and potential memory issues, mental health issues, what you should be aware of. There's a lot of really good information. I always say it's like having your own bud tender. So check it out, lobogene.com, and use the promo code Cannabis101 to get your DNA kit 50% off. Pretty awesome stuff. All right, we're going to get into our cannabis question, what goes well with cannabis, and then our interview with John Carl from the Alberta Cannabis Council, right after we hear this little ditty, The Weed Song, from the artist known as My Dead Dog.
Go smoke some grass. It's time to bust out this podcast.
This is the Cannabis 101 podcast, your guide through the legalization and consumption of cannabis in Canada and beyond.
Great stuff from the artist known as My Dead Dog with The Weed Song. Our cannabis question: in this time of self-isolation, you can have one strain for self-isolation. What is it? One strain is what you get during this time where we have to stay at home. And don't kid yourself, cannabis is really important right now for a lot of people. For a lot of people, they use it to help with some of their medical issues. For other people, they just like to use it during the day, use it during the evening, use it to relax, use it for enjoyment. So if you only had one strain, what would it be? Justin Cardinal says, Grasslands Indica. Nice, sweet smell, under $40 for 5 grams. Can't go wrong. Jesse Ferguson, he's going with Tangerine Dream. That's my absolute favorite. I have a Tangerine Dream pen around here that I grabbed. It's pretty sweet. Z Kittles from Albertan Hockey Jesus, and I apologize if I've butchered the name of that one. But there you go. Me, it's and you're not going to be surprised if you listened to this show before. Blue Dream is my self-isolation strain that I would be going with. It just makes me feel good. It's a pick-me-up, which I think we all need at this point. And I just like the way it feels. It's a hybrid, so I can pretty much use it at any point. So that's what I would be going with, Blue Dream. And by the way, we will have a Cannabis 101 podcast prize pack available if you want to participate in this question. If you're watching on our YouTube or the WeTube channel or social media, you can get in touch with us on Twitter at the Cannabis 101. Instagram, we're at the Cannabis 101 podcast. Facebook at Cannabis 101 podcast. And you can chime in on this, and you can be anonymous if you would like to by emailing us at cannabis101podcast@gmail.com. You could still win the prize, but remain anonymous. So cannabis101podcast@gmail.com. So those are the ways that you can get a hold of us and chime in on what your self-isolation strain is. Mine's Blue Dream, as mentioned. Whatever yours is, let me know, and you could win a Cannabis 101 podcast prize pack. As for what goes well with cannabis, that's anything that pairs well with cannabis. I think it's pretty obvious right now that self-isolation, not that we want it, but that's what cannabis is great for right now. Stay home, get creative. Think of something. Do something out of the box, out of the norm, something you've always wanted to do. If you always wanted to write a book, sit down at your computer right now and do that. And bring cannabis along for the ride. So what goes well with cannabis is anything that pairs well with cannabis, and self-isolation right now. All right, on the other side of this interlude, we will hear from John Carl, the Executive Director from the Alberta Cannabis Council. This is the Cannabis 101 podcast.
This is the Cannabis 101 podcast, your guide through the legalization and consumption of cannabis in Canada and beyond.
Very pleased to welcome back to the program the Executive Director of the Alberta Cannabis Council, John Carl, is joining me. John, like all of us, I assume you're stuck inside. How are you personally and your family getting through the situation we're in right now?
Well, Dean, thanks for having me back on your show. It's always a pleasure. I think my family is fairly representative of everybody right now. I'm working from home and trying to manage my children and figure out what their future looks like. So, yeah, we're all kind of in a holding pattern, wondering what tomorrow, next week, next month is going to look like for everybody.
For sure. And the cannabis industry is in that same situation as a lot of other places. I guess let's start with I think the biggest concern for a lot of people in the cannabis industry is, as of right now, and maybe you can give us an update, the government funding packages out there do not seem to be including the cannabis industry. Is that the correct synopsis of it?
Well, in a nutshell, yes. And we don't believe it's anything malicious on the part of government. But a lot of these emergency preparedness plans were written up before our industry even existed. So if they wrote a financial relief program, doomsday what if scenario, they probably wrote it 5 or 10 years ago. And, we weren't around yet. So we have been omitted from some of the big relief packages. But I think by talking with government, some of the conversations we had, that we're going to see them, correct that mistake. And they've acknowledged it's a mistake and not intentional. So hopefully we'll get there.
Yeah, it sounds like it's just a matter of official wording right now, and that can be amended. Have you been in conversation with a number of people about this, and like outside of the industry, in the government, and is this something that you think will be a quick fix, or is this something that the cannabis industry is going to have to wait for?
Well, I certainly hope it will be a quick fix. If March of 2020 is remembered for anything other than coronavirus, it will be remembered for how quickly government adapted and how quickly decisions are made. So there's really no reason this decision shouldn't be made quickly as well. But with that, we have had some conversation with government and with stakeholders, and yeah, we're optimistic that this will get resolved. You had mentioned kind of earlier that retailers were in the same boat as people are, and it's interesting because I've spoken to a few retailers in the last few days, and they're having some fantastic sales. People are coming into the stores and buying because they're all sitting at home with nothing better to do. So, right. I'm going to guess the liquor stores are probably having a good run on their inventory, and certainly the cannabis stores that I've spoken to have been quite busy as well. So that is encouraging for our sector, that maybe we won't have to let go of staff. But, certainly there are things that can be done and should be done in order to protect the health and safety of both the consumer and the staff in the stores. And those are some of the other conversations that we're having with government right now.
Right, and I think it's important to note that this isn't the cannabis industry saying the tax discussion is one thing. This is we just want to be treated as an industry like everybody else. They just want to be in the same boat as everybody else. It's not asking for any kind of special treatment.
Well, exactly. I mean, our employees are no different than any other industry's employees. They have to pay their rent, they have to buy their groceries, they have to feed their children, and they have to get by in these treacherous, terrifying times. So we're, as an association, just trying our very best to ensure that those people get the same protection that other Canadians are getting. There's no reason why those individuals should be penalized because they're working in the cannabis sector rather than in the grocery sector, right?
100%. And I think also I saw the other day, and I tweeted it out today, that I saw that, liquor restaurants are actually delivering liquor now with some of their food. And, we know that there are some liquor delivery. I'm wondering if cannabis would be able to be delivered during this time of self-quarantine like anything else. Is that, do you think, a possibility right now?
Well, Dean, here's the reality of this. Cannabis is already being delivered. It's just not being delivered by the legal market. It's
right.
being delivered by the black market. So we've been asking for the opportunity to have cannabis delivered to compete with the black market because, since the day that this legalized, the goal was to overcome the black market with a legal market. So we have to be on the same playing field as them. I don't know that we're going to get delivery out of the Alberta government anytime soon. Some other provinces are allowing it and have been allowing it for a while, but I think that's going to be a bit of a stretch for the Alberta government to do. However, we're hopeful that they will at least allow the opportunity for consumers to order online, pay online, come into the store, pick up their bag with their product and leave. With the goal of that being as little physical contact as possible and the shortest amount of time in the stores as possible. Almost like a drive-through environment, but without the car. Right?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. I look at it and I just think, though, if the AGLC can say, yeah, restaurants, you can deliver alcohol with your food now, why can they not make that decision with cannabis? That's the question I ask.
I believe they can make that decision. But I believe they don't want to.
Right. Yeah.
To put it bluntly.
Yeah, I would agree on that. Now, what are you hearing, John, from your retail industry friends and members of the Alberta Cannabis Council as far as what's happening with them? I know Fire and Flower, I got an email from them about some store closures. I've heard from some other people in the retail industry that they are probably going to be closing soon. What are you hearing on that front?
Well, I've heard a lot of rumors, just like you have, that a lot of retailers are getting nervous. There's fear that their staff will get sick or that they will get sick, and obviously that wants to be avoided. I know a lot of stores, though, are taking precautions to ensure that their stores are kept clean and to ensure that their stores are safe environments for people to come and purchase. So, as an example, I know that a few retail stores have limited the physical size of their store. They've put up temporary barricades so you can only come so far into the store. I know that they're wiping down and cleaning their stores quite regularly, far more regularly than you normally would, obviously. I spoke with one retailer, and they actually have a staff member standing outside. The staff takes turns. They spend an hour outside each. And whenever someone walks up to the store, it's the staff member who's touching the door and opening it, so that's the only person touching the door.
Wow.
So there's a lot of precautions being made by our retailers to ensure that their staff are safe and that the consumer is safe as well.
Yeah, removing a lot of paper products and a lot of the sample jars and things like that, taking every precaution and wiping down. I know I know that's happened in everywhere because it's no different than any other business. Nowadays, you walk into a place and you think about it when you pull on that stainless steel knob to open the door or something like that. Things that we might not have thought about 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, I was laughing at a friend of mine because as he opens the door, he reminds me of a teenage girl in her sweater. They have the long sleeves. Well,
Right.
he had his hand pulled up in his sleeve to open up the doors. And I've started doing the same thing. We don't want to touch anything right now. Yeah, and one thing I think for your viewers and listeners to be aware of is that the majority of retail outlets, and I know this is true in cannabis, I would assume it's true in other markets as well, but they're no longer taking cash. They won't accept cash.
Oh,
Cash
okay.
only, right? And even in some environments, in some stores, I've heard they're limiting your purchase to under $100 so that you are only able to do tap.
Right.
They're taping up the credit card slot so you're not touching the buttons.
And
Right?
that's
'Cause
so smart.
You don't
It's
want to
just
catch it from the machine.
Yeah,
It
you
is,
have
yeah.
to do this, right? We have to get ahead of the curve. If anybody's been paying attention to particularly the chief medical officers and people that have been speaking on that behalf, is getting ahead of this curve and slowing this down. And we have to take extraordinary measures right now. And the other thing that we should mention for cannabis enthusiasts out there is, cannabis is a very social plant. It's the mere atmosphere around smoking cannabis is about being social, but let's stop sharing joints and stop sharing bongs and stop sharing right now, right? We can have our own cannabis. You can be on one side of the room, I can be on the other side of the room, but the social aspect of cannabis has to come to a bit of a halt right now as well for a lot of people.
That's a great way to put it. Absolutely, people should not be sharing joints, bongs, vape pens, or anything else like that. Bring your own. I think it's okay to, share a product that you've purchased,
Right.
In terms of butter or oil, but by all means, don't be sharing the joint. Don't pass it around the circle like we used to. That's not good for anybody.
Yeah, it isn't, and we will in time be able to have a giant joint circle when this is all done, and really be able to celebrate. And I guess in terms of retail stores, the ones that will stay open until they're told they can't anymore, I guess. And I guess we all have to abide by the guidelines. We've seen casinos and bingos and things like that. Are you hearing anything in the way of cannabis stores being forced to be closed during this time?
No, I haven't. In fact, I've heard the exact opposite. In conversation with the AGLC here in Alberta, they're making every effort as well to keep their supply system healthy and operational. So as long as the licensed producers continue to provide product to them, they will continue to provide product to the retailers unless government makes a decision otherwise. But everybody in the supply chain is cognizant of the current crisis. And this might sound a little bit silly, but we all recognize that when you're locked up at home, it becomes your relaxation entertainment type products that you're going after. So, I heard Netflix has upped the strength of their servers and their bandwidth.
Yeah.
I've heard that Shaw and TELUS are opening up more bandwidth for people without extra cost. Alcohol supply is being protected, taken care of. Why not cannabis the same way? The grocery stores are making potato chips and chocolate bars and fruit the biggest priority in terms of their stock on the shelves. It's the first thing they're putting on the shelves every night because people want that pleasant distraction from the reality of what we're facing. So I think cannabis will be one of those products that, tremendous effort is put into ensuring that the supply chain doesn't get disrupted through this.
Yeah, your comfort products, right? Chips, movie, and a joint.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so you mentioned licensed producers. What is the concern for licensed producers right now? I would imagine, and just from what I'm reading, it would be staff shortages and what happens. You can't just walk away from a plant for 7 or 8 days unless there are automated systems. But what are you hearing from LPs right now?
Well, I'm hearing from the LPs that this is actually not that big of a threat to them because they sterilize so heavily anyways before you get into the grow rooms. Their staff are pretty much naturally protected within the day-to-day operation of the organization. So one gentleman from one of the the LPs that are members of the Alberta Cannabis Council. He was saying that by the time you get to the back of the building where the grow rooms are, you've gone through so much sterilization and cleaning and hand washing and all the rest of it that if there's a bug on you, it's dead.
Right.
So they're not actually overly concerned about their staff in that regard, unless they get sick on the outside of work. But, their staff are taking their reasonable precautions as well. And I'm sure they're not, going to large social gatherings or anything else like that because they want to keep working as well.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the bigger fears, though, is the packaging. It has to be packaged in a certain container in a certain way. And with China being shut down for as long as they have been, I think the bigger concern is a supply chain issue for packaging.
So what does
all that stuff's made in China?
Yeah. So what does that look like, and do we know have any kind of a time frame where that situation gets critical? Is it 2 weeks, 3 weeks, a month? Do we know?
I have no idea.
Huh. That's the scary part, right? That's the scary part.
It is. Yeah, and I think it might also depend on each LP, each supplier, each packaging. And I would think, given how quickly government is adjusting and adapting to the current situation, if we started running out of packaging, I think that would be a fairly easy thing for us to discuss with AGLC and say, hey, come on, guys, we need you to open this up.
Right.
Let us go back to baggies or something. I don't know what the solution is, but I'm sure we'll find it if it becomes an issue.
It seems to be the biggest concern around the cannabis industry, aside from the stimulus packages that are out there, is that just making sure all their staff are healthy. If the staff are healthy, they can continue to operate at the retail level, at the licensed producer level, and I guess that's no different for any business, right? If Safeway didn't have enough staff, well, then what are they going to do, right? So it's the cannabis industry, other than that stimulus package, seems to be in the same boat as a lot of other people. And I thought maybe this was going to be a lot worse as far as an outlook on the industry. But it does seem like it's, having the same challenges and no more extra challenges than other industries.
Well, yeah, absolutely right. And I would actually hazard a guess, and this is purely my theory coming from my home office, I'm not an expert on this in the industry, but I would actually think that logistically the cannabis sector might actually have an advantage over the pre-existing industries that are being hit, simply because most of our processes and most of the policies developed by cannabis companies have been developed in the last 2 years. They're new, modern, innovative approaches to pre-existing problems. So, a big LP or a big retailer can very easily move their office staff to a home-based model because their infrastructure has been designed around the cloud and virtual connectivity, even if you're in the same building, right? Everyone's on laptops and mobile devices and that sort of thing. But if you're a 70-year-old law firm or accounting firm, you might not have that same mobility and modern technology in your processes. You might still be on paper. You might be using desktop computers. You might not have the level of mobility that a new young organization like an LP or retailer would have. And keep in mind that we draw a young staff or a young demographic to work in this industry that are very comfortable with that mobile technology.
Yeah, it's a very, very good point. What else are you hearing, I guess, from any, we've talked about retail, we discussed the LPs. Is there anybody else in the industry that is dealing with specific challenges right now? And what are you hearing from the rest of the industry as far as concerns going forward through this?
Well, I think if anything, this current crisis is shining a spotlight on the areas of legislation that are troubling or concerning for the industry. Things like the buy online and pick up in store restrictions and that sort of thing. So for the sector, I think this will, when we look back on it, this will be a time for us to recognize how we can strengthen the industry, how we can be more competitive with the black market, how we can be better. But I think everybody across the industry, whether it's HR professionals or office staff or growers or retailers or bud tenders or anybody in or related to or around the sector. We're all in the same boat, and that speaks, I think, to the Canadian mentality. There wasn't a lot of legislative push or pressure on companies in Canada to support people and to support industry, to support the staff and each other as Canadians. And that's what being Canadian is all about. WestJet and Air Canada did not jack up their pricing to try to make a buck off of getting people home. They've done everything they can to make it convenient, easy for people to cancel their flights. Safeway is opening, or Sobeys actually, and I think maybe Safeway as well. A bunch of grocers are opening up super early in the morning to allow seniors to come in before the rest of the population touches anything. Like, there's a lot of that going on in this country that isn't being legislated. It's just ingrained in who we are as Canadians. And if anybody ever wonders why the cannabis sector is flourishing in Canada, why so many companies choose to grow and work and exist in Canada, this crisis is the perfect explanation of it. We come together as a community, and we're part of that community as the cannabis industry.
You're right, and I think it's so important to as much as we can to stay open, those retails and those LPs, because if that shuts down, then we know what happens, right? People just return to the black market or go to the black market, right. and that you can unfortunately wipe away a lot of hard work that's been done if cannabis is not available at the legal level.
Exactly. And a lot of people that are now consuming and enjoying cannabis from the legal market, they might not know a person in the black market. So who knows who they're getting hooked up with?
Right.
Who knows who they're buying the product from? There's a predatory existence there that we have to be mindful of. And let's remember that the black market is a group that generally don't mind selling cannabis to minors. They generally don't worry about what additives or chemicals are in their product. That's scary. So
it is.
We have to keep this industry alive and healthy.
It is. John Carl is the executive director of the Alberta Cannabis Council. And John, just before we'll let you go, for those that are in the cannabis industry or interested, they can find more information about the Alberta Cannabis Council and how do they become members?
Well, very easily, they can visit our website at albertacannabiscouncil.ca, or they can phone me directly. Our office number is 587-855-6100. And I'm happy to talk with everybody in the industry because we're all in this together.
Great stuff, John. Thanks once again for joining me over the phone this time as we are doing our part for social distancing. And best of luck through this, and we'll talk to you in the future.
Sounds good, Dean. And thanks for everything you do for the industry.
What's happening? We'll tell you right now on This Week in Cannabis News.
David Wiley from the OZ, OkanaganZ.com/OZ, joining me as he does each week. And David, this is, every person I've talked to in this podcast and my other podcasts, we start the same way. We are living in such a strange time right now.
Are we ever? Yeah, it's, the whole thing of COVID-19 started off as an inconvenience to us stoners and not being able to find the right materials to clean our bongs and vaporizers. But let me tell you, it's no laughing matter now. This is definitely something that's a big deal, and I hope that everyone out there is staying healthy and heeding the advice of the health authorities.
Yes, for sure. And like every other industry right now, the cannabis industry is affected by COVID-19. Specifically, when we talk about the retail level, Fire and Flower sent out an email about several of their stores being closed right now. A lot of other stores have reduced hours, and that's just in Alberta. BC is no different, and the rest of the country, I'd imagine.
Mm-hmm. These are frontline workers, and hats off to them. Anyone out there that's helping people stock up or get whatever they need. As we're being told to stay indoors. And, as COVID-19 spreads, starting to raise questions about whether or not it's prudent for cannabis retailers to close their doors at this point and maybe rely on delivery services. Canada's biggest weed company, they say yes. On Tuesday, Cannabis Growth announced that it was temporarily closing all of its corporate-owned retail stores amid this pandemic. They're following the guidance that's being given by those public health bodies. And Canopy Growth executive made the decision to temporarily close all of its Tokyo Smoke and Tweed retail locations across Canada, of which there are 23. They have stores in Newfoundland, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and the Tweed Visitor Center in Smith Falls, Ontario is closing as well. And their rationale is that they want to do their part to flatten the curve by limiting social interactions. And for them, that meant a shift to e-commerce. Not every retailer has that ability. And despite appeals from our Prime Minister to stay home, there are other cannabis retailers that are not following suit, closing their doors. Our provincial cannabis retail store here in BC is BC Cannabis Stores. They said that they are going to remain open. They put into place a lot of policies to try and keep customers safe and keep employees safe. That includes cleaning and disinfecting frequently touched areas like door handles and cash register countertops, pin pads, those sniff pods that are being used. Spirit Leaf also is staying open. The one here in the Okanagan, well, there are 4, but one of those locations has removed those sniff pods because to them, that's a really that's an area that's touched all the time, and they want to make sure that they're doing their best to keep their customers and their employees safe.
Yeah, and a lot of the retail outlets have removed paper products that can't be disinfected and things like that. So they are taking, the ones that are staying open are taking enormous steps to make sure that the staff and the customer is protected. I was speaking with John Carl from the Alberta Cannabis Council earlier in this episode, and there was even one store that just had an employee outside opening the doors for all of the customers, so they didn't even have to touch doorknobs, which is something that we weren't thinking about 3 weeks ago. Now, every time I touch a doorknob or a door handle, I'm thinking about who has touched it before me right now. The one thing, David, is I worry about the cannabis stores closing. And then what happens? People just go to the black market. And, if they don't know somebody in the black market, then you don't know what you're getting. What I think should be happening is cannabis, like alcohol, should be able to be delivered at this time. There's restaurants, the AJLC in Alberta is allowing restaurants that are licensed to deliver liquor with their meals. And I think, because listen, people are at home, they're isolated. Cannabis could be a big help to a lot of people right now, but either the stores are closed in their area or they can't get to them. I think this is where cannabis delivery, should be fast tracked so, people can, especially people that use this for medicine.
This is really changing the way that the world is working, and looking at proactive ideas like allowing delivery service is exactly where we should be going. Numerous private retailers are staying open and reporting a big spike in sales as people are stocking up. Like you said, this is medicine. And San Francisco is one city that's declared cannabis stores to be an essential service among all this. Ordering online is an option. But again, you have to go out to collect the package. Canada Post has made changes to its delivery methods as a result of this. And it's not going to be delivering packages to the door anymore that require proof of identity or a signature. And we get it. Canada Post wants to do its best to protect its employees. So now what's going to happen is if you're ordering cannabis in BC, which is delivered by Canada Post, you got to go to the post office to pick it. So for those who are in isolation because they're sick, or they may be, or they've come back from travel, there's not really much as far as they have for options at this point.
And there's a lot of places that are only, or not a lot of places, there are some places that are only allowing purchases of under $100. So you can only use the tap function. Cash is being taken out of the equation in a lot of transactions. So there is a lot being done which is obviously socially responsible to make sure that the employees and the customers and all of us are healthy.
Yeah, absolutely, and we should continue along those lines too. We want to make sure that that we're healthy. That's something that we've been saying from the start, just in reference to cannabis, is that it's not only to get high, but it's to get healthy, and I stand by that.
100%. Speaking of money changing hands and cash flow, which is cash is out of the equation right now in a lot of transactions, but there could be a disruption depending on how long this goes in the cannabis industry.
Yeah, cash isn't something that cannabis producers seem to have a lot of these days, and that is definitely something that could become a problem. I recently did a story on Valence, and they're an extraction company in Kelowna. And the CEO of Valence made a statement in an investor call in which he said, cash is king, and at this point, LPs don't really have a lot of it. Now, that was before COVID became a thing, but it translates here. And the analyst Graham Krangler from State Capital, he made the point, too, that having cash on hand is going to help companies get through this escalating crisis. They need to have some firm footing to negotiate with suppliers, because basic supplies that are needed in this industry are becoming stark. Protective gear like masks, those full body suits, they are something that employees who are producing cannabis products have to wear. And they're becoming shorter in supply as they're going out to first responders and those who are in the medical community in order to protect them as they're helping people. Now, this analyst also says that companies like Canopy Growth or Kronos Group or Afria, they have some of the strongest cash positions in the industry, and it's going to be a little bit easier for them to deal with this. Unfortunately, for a lot of other LPs, they're going to see those resources, a little bit more difficult to come by. And we're also looking at the potential shipping delays, factory shutdowns in China, and that's where a lot of the vape hardware is being produced. So that could lead to shortages when it comes to those kinds of products. On the bright side, I guess, if there is such a thing right now, we're not going to see, or not likely to see at this point, any real shortages on flower because the regulatory environment is such that it's generally produced here, and hopefully we won't see a disruption in the supply chain on that end of things.
David Wiley from the OZ joining us for This Week in Cannabis News. You can find them, of course, at okanaganz.com/OZ. And, one of the fascinating in a bad way, sort of like can't turn away from a car accident sort of metaphor, is what is going on with Aurora Cannabis over, I guess, you can look at a year ago. The stock has dropped, and their former CEO, Terry Booth, sold over 12 million shares in the last couple of days. Strange things going on with Aurora Cannabis right now.
And boy, oh boy, it's in only a short period of time, we've really started to see the rise and fall of some of these cannabis giants. And in this environment right now, boy, it's worse. Everything is falling. The Dow and the TSX are just record losses right now. And as people get spooked, it falls further. Now, Aurora Cannabis shares have actually plummeted from over $13 a share about a year ago to under a cent now. And the company's founder, director, and former CEO, Terry Booth, he sold nearly 12.2 million shares over the last few days, and that's 2/3 of his position in the company's equity. So he announced his retirement from the CEO position in February, and the management says that this share sale is actually part of a previously announced transition plan. But boy, does it ever send a message to investors to see that much stock unloaded in this kind of a market. And they're not the only ones. There's another canary in the coal mine, as there always is, and that comes in the form of Tilray. Now, if you could believe this, in 2018, Tilray stock was worth $150 US a share, and today it's trading for $250.
Wow!
What a fall! And, overall, cannabis stocks have been losing investors money for a while now, and COVID-19 is not helping matters. So hopefully we won't see too much more. But honestly, is there a basement? I remember a couple weeks back you asked me how far it might fall, and I said I don't know. I still don't know. You think that you hit bottom, and there's yet another floor below it.
Well, yeah, and that, the floor that just dropped out is COVID-19, right? You think you're at the bottom, and then a pandemic, a global pandemic is upon us, and it's not cannabis is not bulletproof like any other industry right now, and this is just kicking them when they're down almost. It's and then there's talk about the Canadian-wide stimulus from the government and whether cannabis industry is going to be included in that. I mean, it just seems like the cannabis industry is getting so many lefts, they're begging for a right.
I saw on Twitter that BDC was saying basically that they don't serve the cannabis industry.
Yeah.
We're talking about a legal industry here in Canada that needs help. There are a lot of people that work in this industry, that invest in this industry, that rely on it. And it's unfair just to leave them out of any kind of aid at this point.
For sure. The one thing that we can all do during this time as cannabis consumers is be smart about it. I mean, you're not going to sit there and pick up a drink and share a drink or a cup or a Kleenex with somebody else right now. So don't share your joints or your bongs or your pipes or your vapes. And I know cannabis is a very social culture, and we're going to get back to a giant joint circle at some point, but it just can't happen right now. We have to be responsible as cannabis users.
We do. And the Ontario Cannabis Store was definitely beating on this message, saying don't share joints, vapes, pipes, bongs, because it does. COVID-19 spreads through respiratory droplets that are released when you speak, when you cough, when you sneeze, and also left on shared items like forks, glasses, or joints and vapes. So also we're being told to limit our group exposure, to wash our hands very often. And all this stuff tracks. It's pretty common sense. The Ontario Cannabis Store also says that if you're sick, don't smoke. It's been reported that COVID-19 causes infections in the nose, throat, and lungs. And smoking cannabis, just like smoking anything, can impact your lung health. So if you're feeling sick, it's good to take a break from smoking or vaping. There are other options with Cannabis 2.0 products out there right now. And as far as the retail level goes, there's good advice coming out of Spirit Leaf, and that's to call ahead or check their menu ahead and make sure that they know you're coming in. They can put your products aside, and that way you have to spend less time in the store. And you get in, get what you need, and get out.
Yeah, and there's several retail outlets that use that. Fire and Flower has the Fast Lane. They're actually giving a discount, I think, on Fast Lane users. I've used it plenty of times. It's easy. You go on their website, find your location, pick your product, order it. You walk in there, and it's ready. You even get to skip the line. It's like, I use it regularly, so I encourage people to use those sort of things, particularly right now when we want to spend less time interacting with each other, unfortunately, and less time dealing. So you can get in, get out, dealing with other people and in person, I mean. So you get in, get out, use your tap, whatever it is, less contact, the better. Now, this is crazy times, and it's very scary. And we've talked about a lot of stories that have, unfortunately, a negative connotation to them because of what's going on. Let's end with a positive, in that drinks are very, very close to hitting store shelves.
Mm-hmm. We've been excited about this for a while,
Yes.
and it's good to see, especially with that advice that if you're feeling sick, don't smoke.
Right.
Well, hey, you got drink options now. So those long-awaited fizzy drinks are becoming available across the country. I've already seen people picking up a few. You've got Every Brands right now. Valens has a drink out in Ontario Base Camp. And now Tweed says that its Houndstooth and soda are being stocked across the country. So they began shipping to provincial boards and retailers nationwide late last week. And I'm excited to see these. they're interesting. So basically, they left the distribution center on March 11th, and Cannabis says that the availability, unfortunately, at this point in time, might be a little low. It's a rollout of an early product, but you will start to see them through your online stores and your brick and mortar retail. Like we've said before, check the menu online before you go. If you're looking for something and you want to find it, check online. See if you can find it first. There's no sense in showing up at a store looking for them or going all over and shopping around the place. That's not what we want to be doing right now. But as far as the details on these, the Tweed Houndstooth ones that are coming out are the high CBD, and that's generally what we're seeing at the moment. We're seeing more of the high CBD drinks and not so much the THC ones, but it won't take long for those ones to roll out too, and definitely something that I'm excited for. We're also starting to see some other edible products come through, chocolate truffles. Boy, yeah. I haven't got my hands on those.
I did.
But I have not seen so many positive reviews for a cannabis product as these are getting. So something worth trying. We're all stuck inside now, right? So why not get out there and experiment with some new products and see, you pass the time.
I had some of the Edison bites, and it was ridiculously good, and it was and the product, and it worked too. It was really, really good. So I encourage people to check some of that stuff out for sure. The drinks are I'm really interested to see what comes out of them. Is it going to be in a bottle and a can? What's going to be the THC percentage and things like that. I know we've heard a lot about fast onset. So I'm really encouraged to see that. I know THC tea has been making its way through, and we'll get THC drinks in a little bit. But I think the drinks are going to be a real interesting one, especially with spring, summer coming up.
Yeah, great idea to sit out on your patio and have a sip. I've seen them mostly in cans right now.
Okay.
And that was one of the big problems early on, was that they were having trouble with the can and how it interacted with with the THC that was in it. So it looks like they've got that sorted. I make my own kombucha and add some simple cannabis syrup to it, and it's great. So I've been drinking my own home brew drinks myself, and based on my experience with them, I just can't wait to taste what the professionals are doing.
Oh, that's really good, and that's a really good point about doing stuff yourself. You can go buy cannabis oil and chocolate bar, and it's going to be a lot cheaper in the long run, and you have edibles homemade at your house. If you don't want to keep going back to the store to buy pre-made chocolates, which are delicious, buy a jar of oil and go buy some chocolate bars from your convenience store, and you have homemade edibles.
And there's no 10 milligram limit to your homemade goodies, that's for sure.
Yes.
Sky's the limit.
Awesome stuff, David. Well, we'll end on a high note, pardon the pun, with the drinks, and hopefully they're on their way. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode. Hopefully you and yours are staying safe, and, day by day we'll get back to normal at some point, as long as we're smart about it.
Yeah, you bet. And to you and all the listeners out there, all the best to everyone in these tough times.
This is the Cannabis 101 podcast, your guide through the legalization and consumption of cannabis in Canada and beyond.
All right, big thanks to David Wiley and, of course, John Carl from the Alberta Cannabis Council. We did our 420 followers contest on Twitter a while back, and then we awarded a prize package. We're doing the same thing on Instagram. Just follow us on Instagram at the Cannabis 101 podcast, and once we reach 420, everybody involved will be eligible for a Cannabis 101 podcast prize package. thank you very much for tuning into this abbreviated show of the Cannabis 101 podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please subscribe here on YouTube, the WeedTube, or any podcast site that you know of. We are there, and leave us a review. Let us know what you think of the show, and please, how we might be able to make it better. And if you are interested in being a part of the show, whether it's as a guest or an advertiser, you can email me, cannabis101podcast@gmail.com. As we head to break, it's the marijuana song from the artist My Dead Dog as he plays us out in another week. Remember, it's not just about getting high, it's about getting healthy.
Marijuana, I've grown very fond of. You get in my brain, I love you, Mary Jane marijuana. Oh, hello, lemon cheese, another bowl for me, please. You get in my brain, take me down my knees, oh, lemon cheese. Marijuana, easy right to be fond of. You get in my brain, I love you, Mary Jane marijuana. Oh, hello, tight stick, you know the shit that's tied to a stick. You get in my brain, you're driving me insane. Oh, hello, tight stick, yeah.